Hi everybody, welcome to 6 Hot Tips for your e-newsletter. This is the first of a series of 3 webinars that LEAP is running as part of our white paper series. You might know LEAP as previously being Try Community Exchange. We recently rebranded, and this is the first white paper is about online communications and assisting you making your e-newsletter even better than what it already is. Don't forget, we have another webinar on the 14th, Leaping the Digital Divide, and on the 21st, 6 tips for great volunteer teams. And you can register for those at leap.ngo. Okay, so let's get on with the 6 hot tips for your e-newsletter. And before I start, just a little bit about me. My name is Sylvia, and I'm the head of LEAP CommunityNet. CommunityNet.ngo is the URL. And I'm the head of LEAP Online Communications. CommunityNet is, for those of you who haven't heard of it, is a website for human services to find news, resources, and events. So if you go to CommunityNet.ngo, you can find resources for all target groups and service types. You can find big picture news, technology news for nonprofits, volunteering news, funding, jobs, events, and also we have a geographical blog for Greater Western Sydney areas. So please do visit and subscribe to some of our e-news if you have never been to CommunityNet. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Instagram, and YouTube. If you go to leap.ngo, our new website is under construction, but all the links to our social media accounts are there. And we'd love you to connect with us through any of those platforms if you're in them. Okay, I've been at LEAP, previously Try, for 16 years, and I've been pretty much involved with CommunityNet throughout all that time. And we have developed a number of e-newsletters, some of which you might already subscribe to for CommunityNet. And this is about sharing our learnings, about how we've developed our e-newsletters, what we learned along the way, about analyzing and evaluating, and tips on content and design and so on. Throughout the webinar, you're welcome to ask questions and make comments, and we'll try and leave time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions you might have. At the end of the webinar, I'll be sending everyone an email with links to any of the resources I'll be mentioning throughout the webinar. So don't worry about taking notes, because you'll be getting that email with links. And you'll also be the first ones to get the copy of the white paper, which has a lot more information about our research in regards to newsletters and best practice for them. Okay, so let's get started. Let's get right into it, and let's go to our first tip. Tip number 1 is design for mobile. And this means getting your email newsletter to display optimally on mobile devices. And it's just as important as ensuring that it can be read in long-standing email clients like Outlook and Gmail. And you might wonder why I'm putting this up as a first tip. There are so many things to consider when creating or maintaining an e-newsletter. But this is the first tip because we know now that around 50% of email communications are opened via a mobile device. Now, this figure varies depending on the research you read, but it's fairly close, and it's a growing trend. Now, it depends on the industry you're in. In the nonprofit world, this percentage might not be quite as high. We know from CommunityNet stats, for us, for people visiting our website, it's around 15% only people on mobile devices, but that is growing. I mean, that percentage was virtually zero a few years ago. Now, if you're using a professional e-news service, chances are the mobile design is already built in, and we're going to look at some of those options in tip 2. It's very tricky to design email communications that will render exactly the same on Outlook, on Gmail, on iOS, on Android, online. And there are a number of services that you can use to check if your email communications are mobile friendly. It's also an ongoing thing you have to do because, for example, with the online version of your newsletter, browsers change. updates get sent to iOS or Android. So just because your email newsletter looked fine a week ago, Internet Explorer might have had an update and then it might display completely different. It's a very frustrating thing and something that we are still trying to get exactly right as part of our rebrand, where we're rebranding all our templates. These two services, Email on Asset and Litmus, what they do is they will generate screenshots of your test emails so you can see what they will look like across a wide range of devices and resolutions. Now, they don't come cheap, and you can sign up for a free trial though to see how they work, and you get a couple of days grace, and you can try them out for a couple of days. Not everyone, of course, has got the budget to afford these services. So what you can do yourself is ask your mom, and this is a free option rather than paying for a service to test your emails, and list the help of everyone you know, your coworkers, your friends, your family, to be testers for you. So sending your e-newsletter out and ask people who are using different browsers and different mobile phones, and let them know that you would like some feedback. Maybe they can send you some screenshots so that you can identify any problem issues. Your email newsletter should always include an option at the top for readers to open it on a browser. This is the online version of your e-news, and the reason we need to have that there is, number one, if it's not displaying optimally on their email client for whatever reason, they can click on that and go to your website or to your online version of your e-newsletter. One reason why it might not be displaying properly on Outlook, for example, is people might have their pictures turned off, or they might be reading only text email. I know some government agencies, you can only send and receive email by text. So they're going to be missing out on a lot of the content and the visuals of your newsletter. So there's your link for them to view it online. Now, if the newsletter opens within your website, you need to ensure, of course, that your website is also mobile friendly. And the best tool to check that is the Google Developers Mobile Friendly Test. If you haven't tested your website, if you're not quite sure whether your website is mobile friendly, just enter your URL and it will let you know if your website is mobile friendly. So that's the result you want to get. If it isn't mobile friendly, it will tell you why and what you need to do to fix it. So Google introduced this last year at the same time that they announced they would be favoring mobile-friendly sites on their search results. So if your site isn't mobile-friendly, it's a very good idea to get onto it as quickly as possible, because your search rankings will suffer if it isn't. Okay, Google will not rank you as high. Okay, so that's tip number one. The next tip is to use a professional email service. A quality e-newsletter provider is really a must. Okay, Outlook is not built to handle large number of subscribers and mass emails, and maintenance is really troublesome. So if you're doing an e-newsletter by going to Outlook and just typing it in and sending it out to a mailing list on Outlook, that's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to design an e-newsletter template on something like Word or Publisher and then put it on Outlook and send it out. And it's not a good idea, God forbid, to attach a PDF to an email and send it out, and that's the version of your e-newsletter. And we'll talk about why that's a really bad idea in a minute. So you want to be able to have access to good quality templates that will handle things like subscriptions, analytics, reporting. These are the big three, or some of the big ones in standalone e-newsletter services: MailChimp, Constant Contact, and Aweber. Now, my favorite out of all of those is MailChimp. It has a really intuitive interface. It's fairly easy to use. It's friendly. It has a huge knowledge base, tutorials, help. It has hundreds and hundreds of beautiful templates that are already mobile friendly, so you don't need to worry about making it responsive. And their pricing, none of these are free. For MailChimp, It is free for up to 2,000 subscribers and 12,000 emails per month. So if you're not sending your e-newsletter to a huge mailing list, MailChimp is a great free option, and it gives you some great statistics to be able to evaluate how your e-newsletter is going. If your website is running a content management system, CMS for short, like Joomla or like WordPress, there are e-newsletter components specifically designed for CMSs, and they integrate with your site and can do great things like pull content from your site to populate your e-newsletter. So you're not doing two jobs. You're not updating your website and then having to also produce an e-newsletter. You can integrate them. CommunityNet, for example, is built on Joomla. And for Joomla, we're using a component called AC Mailing. This is an example of that's a shot of our funding blog on CommunityNet. So once a week, that's a weekly e-news that we send with funding news. What AC Mailing does is it creates, you can see on the right-hand side, it creates an e-newsletter from a template that we created. It just puts the new content in automatically. So all we have to do is send it. For WordPress, if you're using WordPress, there are a number of plugins that you can use. Those are some of them. None of these are free, but they are a lot cheaper than a standalone email service. AC Mailing will set you back, depending on the version you use. You can have a starter version that is free, actually, but it's not that great. It's very limited. Then there's a business version and an enterprise version, and the features increase, obviously, the higher the version. We're using the enterprise version, and I think it sets us back maybe a couple of hundred Australian dollars each year. And it has statistics, it handles subscribes and unsubscribes, sign-up forms. So it's a very good investment. So if you're running a content management system and you have a newsletter that is drawing content from your website in order to create it, that is a really good option to have rather than have a standalone now. Now, whatever service you choose to go with, it will be more than just an e-newsletter service. It can become your email communication strategy with all of your stakeholders. And it can be a great communication tool for a group of organizations, for example, to create an e-newsletter. You might want to do that, for example, if you're running a campaign together or a particular project together, or you're a member of an interagency and you want to do InfoShare in a more efficient way. I'm going to show you an example of that. I'm going to show you the example of the Parramatta Courier Interagency, the PKI for short. We recently built a WordPress site, a very simple WordPress site for them, which is basically a blog. It also has an events calendar. They had an issue that I'm just going back a step here, why they wanted this. Interagencies, as a rule, they tend to have a members mailing list on Outlook, and they tend to send InfoShare emails out. And if you belong to any of those lists, you know that they can get pretty email heavy and they can swamp your mailboxes. And it's also often up to the convener to manage the list and the InfoShare. It all falls on them. So these are some of the issues that PKI was facing, and they wanted to do things differently. They also wanted their InfoShare to go beyond their list and to find a cost-efficient way of promoting their services and events to the community. So this website, everyone on the interagency contributes content to, and it's very easy to do. So instead of emailing the info out, it goes on the blog. And we've set up MailChimp for them so that once a week, an email newsletter is automatically generated from the new content on the website, and it goes out to the mailing list. Anyone can subscribe to the mailing list. So it not only goes out to members, but also to members of the community who sign up to find out about news events from the Parramatta Courier Interagency. So what this has meant for the conveners, it has vastly reduced the amount of time they spend looking at and forwarding InfoShare emails. The subscribing and unsubscribing is now automated, and everyone on the interagency is taking ownership, being responsible for their own InfoShare, rather than just sending out emails to the convener saying, please forward this, please forward that. And the most important thing is they can measure through MailChimp statistics the efficiency of these email campaigns. And and promote it to the community. So before they had no way of finding out, what are members of the interagency interested in, what are they clicking on, what sorts of things do they want to know about. Now they can, and they can also share their events and services with the community as well. So that's just a brief overlook of how an e-newsletter can be created by a group to really benefit the way they communicate, whether it be services or campaigns or projects, advocacy, whatever it is. Okay, let's go to our next tip, which is to make your newsletter visually appealing. I'm sure most of you get a number of e-newsletters on your email account, probably too many. And I just want you to close your eyes for a second and think about the way you read them. Because we read differently online, don't we? We tend to scan e-newsletters to find the story that interests us. And in addition, most of us won't scroll past the first 3 items or so on your email. We're busy, we have reduced attention spans. So nobody is going to read an e-newsletter that looks like an essay or that looks ugly. There's just no time. So you want to make your newsletter pleasing to the eye, first of all, to ensure people are interested enough to just even begin scanning, just draw the eye to it, let alone read anything that's in it. I'm going to use the example of our latest Parramatta e-news for this tip. It will also be part of the next tip, and I'm going to divide this particular e-newsletter email into 3 parts. So this is the top, we're going to look at the content middle, and then the bottom, just to see which elements are in each part. So let's look at the top. This week's call to action, okay, at the top about default. So whatever your call to action is for that particular time, whether you want to draw people's attention to an event or donations or whatever it is, you want it to be right at the top, of course, so people can see it straight away. At the moment, of course, we're promoting our webinar, so that's what's going on top of everything. And make it easy to find content. So we have a table of contents. So if people are really busy and, for example, they're a family service and all they want to read about that week is the family news in Parramatta, they can just click on the families and children link and it will go straight to that section. In the middle, so this is the content. So for the Parramatta e-news, again, it draws content from the Parramatta blog and puts it into the e-newsletter. So make sure you have some colorful images. We don't have huge images there. We're just trying to draw the eye to that particular article. If your e-newsletter tells a lot of stories about your organization, you're going to want to include lots of images. You can use stock photos, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But if you're talking about events you're running or the difference you're making in people's lives, what people want to see are actual pictures of that happening. So they tell such a powerful message that text will never compare to. So keep your text and your story short and make sure you include a lot of images that really tell a story, or even videos as well. You can start doing that now. Include clear headings, so when people start reading an article, they know pretty much exactly what they're going to be reading about. So they're going to read the article title first and then decide whether it's worth reading the rest. You also want to make space for white space. You want to take advantage of that. So don't cram your content so that it makes it difficult for people to read. Don't be afraid to have quite a bit of white space around your articles and around the elements of your newsletter. We also have read more links. So we don't actually include a full article on our newsletters. We include a bit of a teaser, if you like, and then people, if they want to read the full article, they click on the read more. The reason we do that, there are a couple of reasons. One is that the articles can be quite long. So if we were to include all of them, it would make for a really long newsletter, and you don't want that, as we mentioned before. And the other reason is that we want to drive traffic to our website. We want people to go to CommunityNet, to read the article, to engage with other elements of the site, to subscribe to e-newsletters, to get to know LEAP and the other services we provide. So that's our main aim. So that's why we have a read more. We want people to click on that and go to our website. So if one of the your aims with your e-newsletter is to have people get to know more about you and go to your website, use that for something that you think, oh, people will really want to read the rest of that. So let's put a read more there, and that will drive traffic to the site. Now, when it comes to photos, we were talking before the importance of having some photographs on your e-newsletter. These are some of the free stock photos sites that we use. They're fantastic because most of them there's no need for attribution. They're basically very generous organizations that have made available hundreds of thousands of photos for you to choose from. So not just obviously for your e-newsletter, but if you have a blog or a newsletter, they're great. With paid stock photos, we have used deposit photos, and we're thinking of using canned stock photo. They're the two. I've done a lot of research on paid stock photo site, and they're the two that I think are the most reasonably priced. It can be really confusing, their pricing, so just be careful when you sign up if you decide to sign up for a stock photo site. Deposit photos sets us back, they're a US site, so it will be in US dollars. So Australian dollars sets us back about maybe $1,200, $1,300 a year. And that allows us to download 10 photographs or 10 graphics per day. So it's really quite a good deal because they can be horrendously expensive. Don't ever, whatever you do, go for the pay by photo subscriptions. They're really, really expensive. So if you're going to pay for stock photos, I really recommend you look for a yearly investment and have a look at those two and see what you think of them. All those links will be in the document I'll be sending you today, so don't worry too much about having to remember them. Okay, let's go to number 4, which is to promote your website and social media. Now, presumably you have a whole of organization promotional marketing strategy that includes an online communications plan. And if you don't, it'd be a good idea to start one. And your e-newsletter is part of that, and it has a goal. You're not doing it just for the fun of it or because you have time to do it. You have a purpose. So what is it? Okay. Whatever your particular purpose, we all have, I think, a common one, which is the ultimate aim of an e-newsletter and probably any promotional strategy is to drive the reader to answer a call to action. This call to action might not always be the same. Okay, it might vary from time to time. So, for example, near the end of the financial year, your aim is to get donations, or there might be a big event you want people to register for, or you're running a campaign, or you want to drive traffic to your website. So in CommunityNet's case, at the moment, of course, our call to action, as I showed you before, was for people to register for our webinars. But our overall call to action is to drive traffic to the website. Our weekly call to actions also include encouraging people to contribute to the e-news as well as give us content, because we get a lot of content from organizations wanting to promote their services. So on every newsletter, this is a constant, we encourage people to promote their event services and resources, and we include links to all the relevant web pages for that particular e-newsletter. Always we have a contact link, so if people need to ask you something, they can easily find it. This is always, by the way, near the after the content of your e-news, so towards the bottom. And we have other links, becoming a partner with CommunityNet, supporting us, submitting content. We also include a subscribe link, even though we're sending this to subscribers, because if they happen to forward that email to someone else or share it on social media, then that person who opens that email will easily find a link there to be able to subscribe themselves. And of course, you always need to include by law an unsubscribe link on any regular email communication you're sending out. You are required to have that to give people an easy way to opt out of your email communications. Another thing we do is we encourage people to share the e-newsletter, to forward it to a friend by email, or to share it on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and you can add other social media platforms there if you like. When people click on a link, for example, for Twitter, it just opens Twitter, it puts on the link and the title of the newsletter, and they can easily share it. Okay, so you want to make sure that you integrate your call to actions in all your online communication. So your e-newsletter should be one part of a whole. One thing we're trying to do with Leap, for example, is our email signatures. Whenever you're having an event, or you're promoting a training calendar, or you released a great resource, or whatever it is that your call to action is, it doesn't just go into your e-newsletter. Okay, it goes at the top of your website, it goes on as a banner on your email signatures, it goes at the top, pinned to the top of all your social media platforms, so that you have an integrated promotional strategy and you're tapping into as many markets as you possibly can to try and get that call to action answered. Okay. Okay, so that's the footer of our e-newsletters, which has our Leap branding, and there's the link to all our social media accounts, which of course you should always have, if you're on social media, a link to all of those so people can find you and connect with you by your e-newsletter. It doesn't mean that everyone is going to look at those and notice those, but it's there, and you will get people looking at least some of them, so you will get different ways for people to engage with you. Let's go to the next one, which is about segmenting your list. So we're getting a bit more technical than the last two. What is segmentation? Basically, it means that instead of having one massive mailing list that your e-newsletter goes out to, you have a number of mailing lists that you craft different emails to. Or you can have one massive mailing list, but you also have the means to send an email to just one segment of that list. Okay, chances are your audience, the organization's audience, is varied, okay? You have clients and partners and funders and volunteers and donors and different demographics, which might include, different ages, different genders, and so on, different geographical locations. So if you're sending your e-newsletter to the whole of your audience, particularly if you have a large audience, if you're an organization that has many different varied projects, like Leap, for example, okay, if you're sending it to all of them, it might not be the best way to craft your message to get that call of action answered, because the call of action will probably be different for each segment of your audience. There are things that you might want your clients to do that your donors might not necessarily be interested in, okay, and vice versa. So how do you do segmentation? Okay, so you either have a number of different lists for people to choose to subscribe to. In CommunityNet's case, which I'm showing you now, we have a range of e-newsletters for subscribers to choose from. So that depends on their interests and their location. So there are topic specifics, such as big picture sector news for managers and CEOs, and geographically specific, such as the Greater Western Sydney news, just for people in that region. The other thing you can do in your sign-up form, and this is an example of just a random one I found, you ask relevant information that will then help you segment that list. So for example, you might ask people their age bracket. The danger in this method is that when people sign up to a mailing list, they often don't know that much about you as a rule. They've either been referred to, or they come across your website and they think, oh, I'd like to find out what these people do, and sign up to find out what their activities are and their news are. So they might not be very willing to fill out a 20-field form with personal information. So you need to use this method wisely and think about the best way to implement it. Our sign-up form on CommunityNet just asks for your name and email address, because we want to make it as easy as possible for people to sign up. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both methods. So it's up to you which one you choose. Segmenting your email list will have an overwhelmingly positive impact on the engagement of your subscribers, and it will really increase your open and click-through rates. We're going to talk about it in a minute. That's our next tip. It's about analyzing and evaluating. Excuse me. Okay, so this is really important. This is probably the most important tip, because there's no point in doing anything that's part of an online communication strategy if you're not evaluating and constantly tweaking and making it better, getting rid of what doesn't work, improving things that are sort of working, and making sure that the things that do work you highlight. Okay, so that's one of the reasons it's so important to send your e-newsletter through a dedicated e-newsletter service, because it allows you to measure the success of your email communications. You won't be able to do analysis and evaluation if you're copying and pasting content or a template into an Outlook email, or if you're attaching your newsletter as a PDF on an email. It's basically a waste of your time. It's also a waste of your time if you do have a beautiful newsletter and an email service that allows you to have statistics, but you never look at them, and you don't have a monthly analysis, at least, of each one, which is what we do. We keep a monthly analysis of all sorts of statistics from our e-newsletter and website, and that's really important to do. So let's look at some of the things that you want to measure. The first thing you can measure is you want to know how many people even opened your email, and that's called the open rate. So it's the percentage of subscribers who open your email. Excuse me, water. Okay. So how do you know what a good open rate percentage is? MailChimp has email marketing benchmarks that they frequently update, and based on emails, e-newsletters sent through their service, they divide them by industry, and they look at the average opening and click-through rates. So we use that for comparison purposes, and they do it every month, so it's constantly being updated. Currently, their average open rate for e-newsletters for nonprofits is around 25%. There are different companies doing benchmarking, and this is not an exact science, and you can go on the web and find lots of different varied opinions about what the open rate is. So I've decided, you can go crazy trying to decide who's got it right. So MailChimp, because it's such a respected service and so many nonprofits use it, it's a really good benchmarking tool, I think, to use. So I'm going to take that 25% as being at least slightly accurate. So that means if at least 1/4 of your subscribers are just opening your email, well, you're doing well. But it's not an exact science, of course. An open rate is not 100% accurate. Recording an open, it only happens if the reader's email client is capable of displaying HTML with images, and that option is turned on. So if you're sending text-only emails, there is no way to record open rates. Similarly, people reading your HTML email without images showing will not be recorded as opens. The only exception to that is that if people click on a link, whether if they're reading the email as text or they have images turned off, but they click on a link, then obviously they have read at least some of your email, and that is counted as an open. So when we say 25%, that's a very conservative figure, and it's probably a little bit higher because of those open rates we can't measure. As your list size goes up, the open rate tends to fall. Okay, and there's no consensus on exactly why that happens. I tend to think it's possibly because smaller organizations are more likely to have personal relationships with their list subscribers, where a big organization that has a massive mailing list, you might not have that personal connection, and they might not be likely to open that email every week. So never take your open rate as a hard and fast number, because you never know the true figure, but it is a general guide, and it's a great guide to measure the trends of your email campaigns. If you're getting 20% to begin with and then you go up to 35%, ooh, that's terrific. But if over a number of months you're going down from 25% to 18%, that's a big drop. You want to wonder, okay, what is it about our content in our e-newsletters that used to be so great, but now isn't, and people are not opening? Of course, just because someone opens an email, it doesn't mean they read it. It doesn't mean they engage with it or answer your call to action. This is where the click-through rate can help. That's the percentage of subscribers who clicked on a link on your e-newsletter. The average click-through percentage for nonprofits, just under 3%. That's pretty dismal. But remember how busy people are, and that's just the reality of it, that only about 3% of people who open your email will actually click on a link. Another great evaluation tool, especially if you're trying to direct traffic to your website through your e-newsletter, is to have Google Analytics integrating with your e-newsletter. It means you can measure what percentage of your website hits come from your e-newsletter campaigns, which can be really useful, because then you can compare that to the hits you get directly or your search hits or your social media hits. Google will actually separate them all. Google Analytics is another webinar altogether. That is just one of the many amazing things it can do, and it's free. So any professional email newsletter service you're using should be able to integrate with Google Analytics. It should be able to measure your campaigns. Okay, so how can we improve our open and click-through rates? You can, and there are a combination of strategies to do that. So first of all, of course, implement the strategies discussed here in this webinar and the white paper that I'm going to email you all. We actually have CommunityNet newsletters average open rate is 29%, and our click-through rates are around almost 11%. So I think these higher than average rates, particularly the click-through rate, which is the most important one, are due to, remember we talked about segmentation, so crafting different emails for each audience, as well as interesting, relevant content and trusted content. And you need to be reliable. You know, don't send your e-newsletter, start sending it once a month, and then start sending it every 6 months or every week and then every day. I mean, people like consistency. So we try and send in each particular newsletter on a particular day of the week, so people know they're going to find that on their inbox, and it's kind of getting people used to that kind of service. We don't always get it right, of course. Sometimes you can't do that, but as a rule, we try to do that as much as we can. So you should also, one of the things you should do as well is look at your subject lines when it comes to e-newsletters. Boring really works best. Keep them short. So don't try to sell what's inside the e-newsletter in your subject line. Try to tell people what's inside. So there's a big difference. Trying to sell it on a subject line might land you in the spam folder. Where telling them exactly what's in it is a really good strategy. If you're another example of a good subject line, if you're a really well-known brand, like a lot of people who subscribe to our e-newsletter, they really know, you say CommunityNet and they know exactly what you're talking about. So we make sure we have CommunityNet in our subject lines to begin with. So people know straight away, this is where this email is coming from and it's worth opening. I know I'm going to find good content there. So you can test it, test your different subject lines, see how your open rates and click-through rates go through that. Each newsletter services, most of them have a spam checker. It will analyze your e-newsletter for spammy words that can land you in people's spam folder. So that's a good feature to use before you send your e-newsletter out, is to click on that button that says check for spam. And then they will give you a percentage, or not a percentage, whether you're 4 out of 5 or 1 out of 5, and give you the reasons why you might be landing on people's spam folders. If you're getting a lot of bounces, that is emails that come back to you as having failed to deliver, that can really lower your open and click-through rates, obviously. So make sure you periodically go through your list and make sure it's current and that you have no email addresses there that no longer exist. Okay, that's our 6 tips. Thank you for watching, and I think, what are we doing for time? We got about 6, 7 minutes, 8 minutes for questions. So if anyone's got some, now's the time to ask them. You can also contact me. There's my contact details. The best way to contact me is probably by email, because I check my emails all the time. Otherwise, ring me in the office. Yeah, so I'm going to see if anyone's got questions. Oops. Somebody must have some. Don't be shy. Of course, I'm also using GoToWebinar for the first time, so I'm a bit lost. Okay. Here we have. Okay. No one on chat. So I guess I'm so good that you don't have any questions. We will make this recording available to you as well. Oh, here we go. Hey, I found the questions, everybody. Okay, someone's asking, Carla's asking me, I was going to tell you why PDF is not a good way to send e-newsletter. Maybe you asked that question before we actually addressed it, but I'm just going to say it again. It's because you can't measure anything. You can't measure who even opened that PDF. You can't measure who clicked on a link from a PDF. So that's why it's a bad idea. Yes, we can help you set up an e-newsletter. That's another question. So please contact me, and I'm happy to chat about it or to even review your current e-newsletter for any issues you might be having. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be signing off, and it's been really wonderful to have you watching, and we're going to see you next time. Don't forget our next webinars. Go to Leap NGO to have a look at them.